They say a king's anger is heavier than stone, but when that anger falls on a poor market woman, the gods themselves may rise to judge. This is the story of how a simple woman's curse shook an entire kingdom. The market buzzed with laughter and bargaining. Women in wrappers spread their goods, calling out to buyers. Among them was Nkem, a market woman in her mid-40s, medium build, dark brown skin, with braided hair tucked neatly under a faded indigo headscarf. She wore a patched cotton wrapper tied around her waist and a loose blouse. Though her clothes were humble, her smile warmed everyone who passed. Drums thundered as the villagers shouted, "The king approaches." The marketplace parted as King Oba Ifani, late 50s, tall, dark-skinned, broad-shouldered with a graying beard, entered in a flowing gold agbada, coral beads on his neck, and a heavy beaded crown glittering in the sun. His guards, muscular men in their 30s with shaved heads, wore leather tunics and carried spears, marching in rhythm. As the king passed, Nkem bent to adjust her calabash of peppers. Suddenly, it slipped and rolled, bright red peppers scattering across the king's path. Gasps filled the air. The king stopped, his sharp eyes narrowing. Nkem froze, her hands trembling, her face pale with fear. Ignoring her pleas, the king raised his hand toward the heavens. "From this day, misfortune shall follow you and your children, until your name is forgotten." His words echoed like thunder. Nkem cried out, her tears wetting the dust. The market fell silent, the only sound the cawing of crows circling above. The villagers whispered as Nkem gathered her spilled peppers with trembling hands. Some pitied her, but most stepped back, fearing the king's curse might cling to them. Her best friend, Adiz, a slim woman in her late 30s with light brown skin, full natural afro tied with a red scarf, wearing a blue patterned wrapper, hesitated before helping. But Nkem shook her head, whispering, "Do not touch, the curse will spread." That evening, Nkem walked home along the dusty path, her calabash half empty. Children playing by the roadside stopped and whispered, "That's the cursed woman." She kept her eyes on the ground, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her small mud house, with its thatched roof and clay walls, stood at the edge of the village like a shadow waiting to swallow her. Inside her small home, her son Chitty, 17 years old, tall and lean with dark skin, short coiled hair, wearing a simple brown wrapper around his waist, asked, "Mama, is it true the king cursed you?" Beside him, her daughter Ifyananya, 13 years old, slim, dark brown skin, braided hair tied with cowrie shells, in a faded green wrapper, clung to her mother's arm. Nkem hugged them both, whispering, "It was only words, the gods know my heart." But even she doubted. The next morning, Nkem's small yam field, once green and thriving, lay wilted. The leaves curled, the vines shriveled as if scorched by unseen fire. Nkem fell to her knees in disbelief. Neighbors whispered, "The curse has begun." Her hands shook as she dug into the soil only to find rotten tubers crawling with worms. When Nkem returned to the market, no one came to her stall. Customers passed quickly, some even crossing to the far side to avoid her. Her peppers rotted in the basket under the hot sun. Her friend Adiz tried to sit near her, but another woman dragged her away, hissing, "Do you want to share her curse?" Nkem sat alone, her dignity bleeding with every hour. At night, Chitty returned from the stream with an empty calabash. "They chased me away, Mama. They said the cursed boy cannot fetch water." Ifyananya clutched her stomach, crying, "I am hungry." Nkem had nothing but a handful of dried beans left. She cooked, but the pot cracked in the fire, spilling their only meal into the flames. Desperate, Nkem went to the oracle. The shrine was lit with red palm oil lamps, cowrie shells scattered on a mat. The oracle, an elderly man in his late 70s, dark-skinned, bald with white tribal chalk marks across his chest, wearing a leopard skin, shook his rattle. His voice was grave, "The king's curse is no small matter. The gods may answer, but only through sacrifice." The oracle demanded a goat, palm wine, and a white cloth for sacrifice. Nkem's heart sank, she had nothing left. Without it, the curse shall consume you, the oracle warned. She staggered back home, the weight of hopelessness pressing her down. That night, Adis came secretly, bringing a small goat tied with rope and a jar of palm wine. Tears glistened in her eyes. "Take it, sister. The gods must see your innocence." Nkem embraced her, weeping, grateful for one loyal heart amidst a sea of betrayal. At dawn, Nkem returned to the shrine with the goat, wine, and white cloth. The oracle chanted, poured wine onto the earth, and slit the goat's throat. The ground shook faintly as if something beneath stirred. "The gods have heard you," the oracle declared, "but beware, the curse is not broken, only sleeping." For a few weeks, Nkem's life seemed calmer. Her yams sprouted again, and her peppers began to ripen. Chitty returned from the stream with water, and Ifyananya laughed again while plaiting her doll's hair. The villagers still avoided them, but inside their small mud hut, there was warmth and hope. Nkem whispered to herself, "Perhaps the gods are merciful." Far away in his palace, King Oba Ifani fell suddenly ill. His strong voice cracked, and his hands shook during council. At night, his dreams were filled with visions of Nkem's tears and a river of blood. His wives, adorned in coral beads and silk wrappers, whispered that the curse had returned to its master. But the king silenced them with glares. By the next market day, whispers traveled faster than trade. "The king is dying," said one woman, clutching her basket of fish. "The curse has turned back to him," another murmured. Nkem, sitting at her lonely stall, overheard but said nothing. Inside, her heart trembled with both fear and justice. That night, Nkem woke to a strange sound outside her hut. Shadows moved like smoke across her compound. Chitty grabbed a stick, Ifyananya clung to her mother's wrapper. A deep voice whispered, "The curse is not done." Nkem lit a palm oil lamp, but the shadows vanished before the flame. The next morning, royal guards arrived at Nkem's hut. They were tall men in leather tunics with spears, their faces stern. "The king summons you," one said. Nkem's heart pounded as she adjusted her wrapper and kissed her children's foreheads. "Stay here, my little ones. Whatever happens, remember I love you." Nkem entered the palace court. The king sat on his throne, his once proud face pale, his graying beard unkempt. He coughed blood into a cloth. "Woman," he rasped, "what have you done?" Nkem knelt low, her forehead to the ground. "My king, it was you who cursed me. The gods only returned your words." The court gasped. The council summoned the oracle to the palace. The old man entered, shaking his rattle. His voice boomed, "The curse is not the woman's, it is the king's pride. Only humility can heal him." Gasps echoed through the hall. The king's eyes darkened, humility was a word foreign to his throne. King Oba slammed his fist on the throne. "I bow to no one," he shouted. His voice cracked with weakness but burned with pride. The oracle shook his head, whispering, "Then prepare, for the gods do not forgive arrogance." Nkem stayed silent, her head bowed, tears slipping into the dust. That night, the palace shook with strange cries. Servants swore they saw ghostly hands dragging through the corridors. The king woke screaming, clawing at his chest. He cried out for water, but the jug shattered in the servant's hands as if struck by unseen force. The palace was no longer safe. At night, Chitty returned from the stream with an empty calabash. "They chased me away, Mama. They said the cursed boy cannot fetch water." Ifyananya clutched her stomach, crying, "I am hungry." Nkem had nothing but a handful of dried beans left. She cooked, but the pot cracked in the fire, spilling their only meal into the flames. On the seventh night of torment, King Oba gathered his strength and shouted into the dark, "I am the king. I bow to no curse." But as he spoke, his voice cracked, and blood poured from his mouth. The throne beneath him cracked with a sound like thunder. He collapsed, lifeless, his crown rolling into the dust. At dawn, a messenger arrived at Nkem's hut. "The king is dead," he announced. Villagers gathered, staring at her mud house with fear. The oracle himself came, his voice trembling, "The gods have chosen. Nkem, the woman cursed, shall become the voice of truth in this land." Nkem wept, clutching her children. From a poor market woman to the chosen of the gods, the curse had become her crown. The poor woman once cursed by the king now rises as a figure of justice, her suffering transformed into divine authority.